Hello and welcome to CMTV episode 17. I'm Aubrey Going.
And I'm Alison Gavna.
So, Ali, what are you going to be talking about particularly today?
I'm going to look at the heart of the matter. So it's looking at the energetic center in the center of the chest,
Literally the heart, okay?
the heart of the matter, and its implications in our day-to-day life and how connected we feel, how understood we feel, how we relate to relationships both with ourselves and with other people.
I suppose most people would be fairly clear that they would relate to love in association with the heart. And you think about how important that is, very easily demonstrated by the amount of songs that you hear written about love. Love is all there is, love is all that matters, all those kinds of things.
Love is all you need.
Love is all you need. Yeah, good. I'm going to talk a little bit about bunions in relation to muscle imbalance and an upcoming series that we're going to be doing. Do you want to start us off then?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm always quite interested in the understanding of the emotional and energetic influences on the body and how they relate to the physical and the mental state, and what practical things we can do to improve those connections. So I just think a huge majority of people feel tired, worn out, lost, lonely, disconnected.
Mm.
And that's often associated with this heart center.
Okay.
So the heart center, in yoga terms, is called the heart chakra,
Mm-hmm.
which is to do with our ability to love.
Mm.
Primarily love ourselves,
Mm.
but also how that ripples out into the relationships with the people around us.
Okay, so very topical. We've talked about this a little bit over the last few episodes, where we talked about the difference between the kind of the selfish kind of aspect that some people express, where we describe it as service to self. Everything you do is for your benefit at everyone else's expense.
Mhm.
And in the therapy world, I think looms quite large that service to others, that you give and give and give, that there's nothing left for yourself.
Yeah.
And we've talked about really the balanced state being service to all, that you include yourself in that. So that's really the same kind of thing that you're talking about here then with love, that it is both the care, compassion, and love for others, and you should equally apply that to yourself.
Yes,
It's interesting how
absolutely.
those concepts really it carries across the board. Yeah.
Very much so.
Okay.
So, in yoga terms, the color associated with this energy center is green
Mm.
or pink, uh,
Yes.
hence the pink. And it's related to particular organs in the body. So, obviously, the physical heart itself,
Mm.
and even the pericardium, the kind of double sac that holds the heart,
Mm.
that can be influenced by our emotional state.
Yeah.
It influences, it's associated also with the thymus gland. So the thymus gland, it's in the center of the chest, just behind the sternum,
Mm.
and it's like the master gland of our immune system.
Yes. Yeah.
So our built-in self-protection, our immune system will protect us and fight for us. But equally, we can have autoimmune diseases where our own white blood cells start attacking areas within the body.
Mm. Okay. And the thymus is going to be really involved in governing both the positive aspects of our immune system's function, but maybe when it's dysregulated or not functioning properly, we get some of those autoimmune type things, along with other factors, of course, other triggers and things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Lifestyle, genetics, the whole
Mm.
biopsychosocial model that
Yeah.
influences these things. So the heart center, I was looking at what opens the heart and what closes it.
Mm.
So maybe if we look at what closes the heart first.
Because that's probably the more common thing that people are experiencing, or the thing they want to get away from, to get out of. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
So the main thing that closes the heart is hurt and fear.
Mm.
I think this can even start in early childhood, that if we have an overly critical parent, we think there's something wrong with us.
Mm.
And it sets up this whole cycle of self-loathing, self-hate. There's something wrong with me. I don't belong. I don't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And it mightn't have been the parents' intention, but it was maybe our perception at the time.
Yeah, when you haven't really cognitively developed, you don't have the tools to deal with and put those things into perspective, so we can have a slightly skewed view. I thought it was interesting you were saying before as well that oftentimes people think that the opposite emotion or the opposing force, you could say, to love is hate,
Hmm.
but really it's the opposite to love is fear.
Yes.
Okay.
So that could be fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, just even feeling disappointed. You things didn't turn out the way you wanted to. So again, like everything, there's a whole scale of where those fears can be
Mm.
coming from, and probably like fear of abandonment. That would be kind of the root.
Primary thing. Okay. And you can see how then that would knock on into the feeling of loneliness, isolation, because of a sense of abandonment,
Yeah.
either a perception of or actual, I mean, could be either, presumably, because the body's internal environment doesn't know the difference.
Yes.
So the perception of can be the same as actual
Yes.
abandonment. The body's going to respond in a very similar way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we always say, like, the heart and their stomach and your liver, they don't have eyes or ears, so they're relying on the information from your perceptions and how
Yeah.
they're going to be influenced. Okay.
Very much so. So they're the things that generally would tend to close the heart down. Um, then we want to come on to what opens the heart.
Mm.
So kindness, compassion, caring, all of these things set up this um, emotional state and this nearly energetic ripple out into the things around us.
Mm.
So they have a really powerful impact on the heart opening.
Okay. So the idea with opening the heart, we're really saying, like, both in a an energetic sense, but a psychological, emotional, that those things are going to be all interrelated.
Yeah.
And if it's hard to do one, because obviously if you're feeling those fears of uh, rejection, loneliness, and isolation, it might be hard to suddenly just force positive emotion, that instead you turn more to an outward expression,
Yes.
that you express that care and compassion, and then you start to feel it. So it's one
Y-
follows the other.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, it's nearly like a biofeedback.
Mm.
So most people maybe entering into a relationship, they have the premise of don't hurt my heart. And that's nearly putting up a wall, that there's a little bit of a protective mechanism there.
Mm.
And that's fine, but eventually you want to let those walls come down and dissolve.
Okay, so it doesn't remain a barrier, but it is obviously a staged process. I think the opposite end of the scale is people jump in feet first and don't look, don't think. That it's nearly more that you have to, it should be a measured response.
Yes.
But presumably, if you had that, if you're coming from a point of being relatively well regulated yourself, that you have that sense of self worth, then you're not seeking that from outside yourself. And that makes it an easier process. I mean, this is a well known thing, work on yourself first,
Yes.
that you then bring that to the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if you already have worked on developing that feeling of self worth, you've gotten out of that feeling of loneliness and rejection by care and compassion, by expressing that into the world around you. Then, when you begin relationship, you presumably go through a stage of giving the other person a certain amount of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And if that bodes well, if it's responded to in the right way, then you're going to give a little bit more and a little bit more. That's the proper lowering of the barrier, but it's not a barrier to begin with because you already are coming from a point of balance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, cutting
So
across you
these are stages of development.
there.
Um, some of the practical things we can do is focus on breathing into the heart. So
Mm.
where you just do some simple breathing techniques and you imagine you could even do breathing in love and light
Mm.
to really expand this heart center.
Yeah.
And that then ripples out to all around the body and then to the people you interact with.
Mm. I always take a very practical approach to these kind of things, because if you say breathe into the heart, people go, well, you're breathing into your lungs. What are you talking about? But it's your focus and your attention, that it feels like you're breathing a breath of fresh air into that part of the body. And it does feel like that. And we've oftentimes said, your energy flows where your attention goes.
Yeah.
So it's more bringing your attention into it, your
Yes.
intention, we could say as well. And that by breathing in, you could say, we talk about in meditation where you'd say, like, on every exhale, you feel like you're letting go of a little bit more stress. You're obviously not breathing out anything from your muscle tension.
Mm-hmm.
Byproducts and metabolites, we could argue, are breathing out, but it is the focus, the intention, that with each exhalation, your intention is to relax a little bit more. So in this case, with each inhalation, you're thinking about not only expanding the physical rib cage and the lungs, but you are thinking about bringing energy into the heart, bringing in that care, that compassion, that genuine love, like not necessarily we mentioned romantic love, but
Mm,
obviously it's much broader than that.
yeah,
It's
unconditional
an
love.
unconditional caring for self as well, that it's not always about romantic love. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so I think one of the best exercises I've found, and it's something our father Don Going taught us, and he covered in many lectures, it was the practice of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And the practice of forgiveness sets up a vibration in the heart to dissolve these barriers or walls that we've put up from past hurts, past fears, neglect,
Mm.
and so on.
Yeah, he did a really good exercise where, it's no point in forgiving something that you really don't care about. You kind of, yeah, I'll let that go. It's more something that does bother you.
Yes.
So something that maybe you harbor a resentment towards, because resentment will oftentimes, I think, be the next domino to fall. That if you have that
Hurt,
judgment, hurt,
criticism.
then it starts to build into a resentment that
Hmm.
you're being rejected.
Yeah.
So to get rid of that resentment and that hurt, you focus on a time that or a person or a situation or an event that you feel resentment towards, that you
Yeah.
feel hurt by, particularly if you feel that you were in the right and you were wronged somehow, because that's harder to let go of.
Yeah.
And you literally forgive that situation to the point that if it's a person, nearly so much the better, that you can say, I wish this person all of the things I would wish for myself, all of the joys, all of the successes, all of the happiness.
Hmm.
Because if you can do that, you have genuinely forgiven that situation. It's not just, I'll let them away with it, but I still harbor the resentment. That's not really the same thing.
Yeah.
That if you really wish the best on somebody that had done you wrong, that's tough.
Hmm.
That's a real exercise. That's a challenge.
Yes.
And if we can be successful in that, I think we overcome an awful lot of those internal barriers and wounds and hurts that we are carrying ourselves. Nobody else is carrying them for us.
Well, they say resentment is like um, drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah,
So
very true.
resentment will actually eat away at us
Mm,
and make us bitter and disconnected and so on.
mm,
So rather than trying to forgive ourselves, which we often struggle with or find difficulty doing,
yeah.
if we can do that practice of forgiving somebody else, but in a wholehearted, kind, loving way,
Mm,
not I'll forgive, but I won't forget.
yeah.
There is the
There's still the bitterness and resentment in that
yeah,
sentiment. Yeah.
yeah. So it is going into a really good meditative state, getting into a very good level of relaxation, and then just casually bringing that person to mind and wishing them well
Mm,
and wholeheartedly forgiving them. I completely forgive you. I release you from this.
yeah.
And that forgiveness then sets up the vibration of forgiveness, and that helps to dissolve some of the disconnect and the self-loathing, poor self-esteem. Instead of blaming the other person, by totally forgiving them,
Mm,
it sets up this vibration to allow the heart to open and for love and kindness and compassion to come back in.
yeah. And you could evaluate how effective you've been, because oftentimes these patterns become quite ingrained and you might have to return to it several times. That if you ask yourself maybe later that day or the next day, would I be happy for that person if I found out they won the lottery? And if the answer is yes, you've been successful. If the answer is no, we need to continue to work on it to get rid of that ingrained pattern.
Yeah.
That you would truly let it go and you do genuinely wish the best for that person.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes if you've been ripped off, somebody's taken advantage of you, and then maybe they badmouthed you into the bargain, you can feel like a really?
Mm,
Seriously?
yeah,
And it does take a few goes at it. You mightn't get all of it cleared in just one session.
yeah.
There are layers to these things.
And it's not to say the situation is okay then, or you should allow yourself to be suckered by people in the future. Nothing like that.
Yeah.
It's that that is a past event that has gone by.
Hmm.
You learn from it, you develop, you grow,
Yeah.
but don't carry the wound.
Yeah. So it's more about discernment
Mm,
and that you discern, well, what people do I want to surround myself with? You know, do I want like-hearted people in my life, that there is that genuine caring, compassion, kindness, wishing the best for them, the cooperation that, we're helping each other on this journey.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting point you mentioned the other day. You were saying, like, if you look at how you behave and even how other people behave, because people make, they've all kinds of judgments on who they're going to get into a relationship with. But the simple thing of when you get up and leave a table in a restaurant, do you push the chair in after you? That shows that you are considerate, you are observant, you think about other people other than yourself. That the simple thing of just pushing in your chair when you walk away, because you could just walk away.
Hmm.
Somebody else will do it. It's a restaurant. They need to set the table for the next person.
Hmm.
But have you been observant? Have you thought ahead? Have you been considerate of others?
Hmm.
Because it's not taking from you to just take a moment to push a chair in.
Taking responsibility for your own surroundings.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, there are things we can't do anything about, but we can control the things in our immediate environment.
Mm.
I know one of our dad's things where was if you were lost, confused, upset, go tidy your room. And it wasn't that your room was particularly messy, but when you woke up in the morning, the very first thing that you saw when you opened your eyes set your tone for the day.
Mm.
And if things were disorganized and your wardrobe's on the floor and all of that, you're starting off in this confused
Mm.
ball.
Yeah.
Whereas being orderly and having a place for something and keeping things in a neat, tight manner
Mm.
sets up an impression of yourself. I'm somebody who takes care of things. I'm somebody that looks after things. I take responsibility. I have respect for things around me.
Mm. And it is changing the things you can change.
Yeah.
You do have influence over your immediate environment, like your room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Okay. So that kind of covers the what is the dysfunction, the steps that we can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really nice counterpoint. Is there anything else you want to say about that?
And physically, there's things we could do, say, with yoga, coming from a yoga background, having done it as kids and trained as a yoga teacher 25 years ago.
Mm.
And there was some of the yoga poses that were particularly helpful. So the half shoulder stand,
Mm.
you're lying on your back and you bring the legs and hips up, and you could adjust the position of the legs to put more pressure either into the thyroid or throat chakra
Mm.
or into the thymus or the heart chakra. So the
The higher.
higher the legs were raised, the more you'd feel that pressure coming in.
Mm.
Something else that was traditionally used was maybe repeating a certain sound
Mm.
to the extent that you'd feel a vibration in the heart. So particular letters like lamb, Lam, or yam, or yum, yum,
Yeah.
nearly yum.
And they'd, as far as I'd be aware, like they'd oftentimes that would be almost like a chant.
Yeah.
So it'd be like yum 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 yum, and as your vocal cords are vibrating, that you were talking about like changing the pitch. I'm doing that at a particular pitch. You might go higher or lower,
Hmm.
depending what's a comfortable note for you. But I think it's the enunciating the different letters changes the frequency and the pitch a little bit, that you do get more like that wave.
Yeah.
And when you practice this yourself, what you want to feel is that you do feel a sense of the vocal cords not just vibrating, but the vibration, that shake going down into the chest.
Yeah.
And that shaking, that vibration, even just from a purely physiological sense, anytime we shake something, it creates motility. So there's more movement. And you could think about even just a simple thing of the cells in the area being able to eliminate their metabolites, their waste products, just from a simple thing of creating some vibration.
Hmm.
So I always like to look at how do we explain this to the absolute skeptics, to the people who say, I'm not interested in energy and things like that. You say, there's always a basis of these things in each aspect of our being.
Yeah.
So just even looking at it from a purely physiological point of view, that yum, 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 yum.
Okay.
Now as I
Yeah.
go a little bit lower, I
Yeah.
can feel that a little bit.
Resonating.
So experiment with the register and, what's a comfortable pitch for you, but most importantly, when do you feel it in the chest?
Yeah. So again, back to the breath work,
Mhm.
using the breath to bring our focus and our awareness to the heart. doing the repeated sound till we feel that vibrating
Mm.
in the heart to get that resonance. Maybe doing some of the half shoulder stand if you can't manage that. Even just having the legs straight up against the wall
Yeah.
can be a good beginner step until we build our mobility
Mm.
to do.
And to develop the outward expression, do things for others.
Yes, random acts of kindness
Mm.
that, you might be at the supermarket, the person ahead for you of you can't pay for something and just say, put on my tab.
Short
Something
of change,
small,
or yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And you're not looking for anything in return. So there is that pure giving, pure loving, pure connection. So the best way to connect with ourselves is often to connect with others. They mirror back to us
And
what we
even
need.
see other people's needs. Like, it doesn't have to be financial. You could equally be in the supermarket and see somebody struggling to get something off a high shelf.
Yeah.
Pick it up and help them. You
Yeah.
know, that is there things you can do for the people around you? Little small acts of kindness doesn't have to be financial. It's just being observant, seeing the needs of others,
Hmm.
and then taking that little step. I think the simple thing of, I noticed the other day, walking the dog, there's a kid coming the other way, and the dog is kind of busy sniffing, and you just step out of the way. You see the other person's needs. I don't want them to have to cycle off onto the road. And the kid going by went, "Thank you." And I thought, oh, that's unusual, because oftentimes kids are kind of caught up in their own world. I said, "You're welcome." So it's that exchange, that mutual recognition of each other and their needs. It can oftentimes be something as simple as that, holding the door for somebody,
Yeah.
saying thank you when you're expressing gratitude when somebody has done a little act of kindness for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of those things
Mm.
will open the heart.
Good. Okay. Anything else to add on that?
No, I
I
think
think
that
those are nice
covers the main points.
practical steps. Good. So I was going to talk a little bit about getting into the physiology side of things. Bunions, quite a common issue for a lot of people. And we are starting a series that we're going to have on our streaming service on watchhcd.ie. And we're going to look at different aspects of dysfunction. And some of this we will be giving out free. We'll be doing some of the anatomy and then looking at how to really apply that to discover surface anatomy, how to palpate, how to find structures on your own body, then how to self-treat, which you could equally apply into treatment if you're a therapist. You could apply that in your clinic, or you could just do it for yourself or for others,
Hmm.
bringing in that care and compassion for others. Um, and then how to maintain it as well. So we'll look at like home care exercises as well. So self-treatment and self-care, but finding those structures is oftentimes a tricky thing
Hmm.
for some people. So the first thing we're going to cover in that series, that living anatomy, is we're going to take a look at the formation of bunions and the muscle imbalance that contributes to that. So first of all, when there is a bunion, it's that it's not just the big toe, it's the related metatarsal. So the bone in the foot and then the bones in the toes, at that joint, it tends to move out. So we describe the movement of the joint either towards the midline or away from the midline. That'd be a valgus deviation. Probably an easier way to picture this if you think of somebody being knock-kneed. The knee joint is moving in towards the midline. So that's a valgus deviation. In a bunion, we also get a valgus deviation, that the joint is bending, and that will then cause irritation on the outside of the joint, friction oftentimes.
Hmm.
And then the body will try to calm that down by laying down some calcium, and then we can get some calcific deposits. And if we catch this at an early stage, even some of that, what looks like bony protrusion, is kind of soft. When we realign the toe, we do some massage work, we can really correct a lot of that. In late stages now, we do get into ossification, we do get into true bone growth. And at that stage, we might be able to restore function, but for aesthetics, the choices are things like surgery, where they'll either pare down part of the bone or they'll break the toes. And if they do, either of those procedures, you will get the aesthetics. But we can oftentimes tackle this at an earlier stage. So maybe we'll take a quick look at the anatomy for the 3D for medical.
Hmm.
So let's bring up our anatomy app. So we have the muscles set up here. There's kind of the two main muscles that are going to influence the big toe. We have the transverse head here. So there's two parts to this abductor of the hallux. The hallux is the anatomy name for the big toe. So we have this transverse head that goes just underneath what we'd call the metatarsal pad.
Hmm.
And that attaching to the inside of the big toe is going to pull the big toe. I think we can actually take a look at the motion of this here. So in the same way we can wiggle our fingers, the toes do the same thing. And you can see as the muscle contracts, the toe gets pulled in. The opposing muscle then is this one, which kind of sits along the arch. So this is the abductor hallucis. So again, it's a mover of the big toe, but it's attaching to the outside. So the typical imbalance is the one on the inside will get tight and start to pull the toe in this way. The one on the outside gets weak because it's going to allow that bone to bend away. So getting balance back into these two toes, or sorry, these two muscles is going to be really important. But then the calcific deposit that builds up here on the outside and the deviation of the joint can generally be pretty quickly and easily corrected. That if we can normalize the tone and texture of the muscles, we've got a better chance of moving joints. And then if we can retrain those muscles by doing some mobility work or some strength work, we can oftentimes encourage the toe back into better alignment.
Mhm.
I mean, there is genetic factors. That's a fairly known thing. And there is, of course, the environmental things like the shape of the footwear you're wearing. But if we have started to develop this deviation, what's going to lead to a bunion, we can correct it with simple day-to-day techniques that we're going to do ourselves to normalize the position of the joint, take the stress off those structures, and stop that calcific deposit. Like I said, if it's true bone growth, we may not get rid of the bony protrusion, but if we can straighten up the toe even in that circumstance, we can go a long way towards alleviating any pain and restoring function, which I always think is the main thing. Because if the big toe is not moving properly, there is a knock-on effect. It's going to affect the ankle, which will affect the knee and the hip and the low back. It's a slow domino process, and that's why sometimes it's not very obvious. It's not like as soon as your big toe bends, your back is going to hurt. So because the chain, both in terms of the kinetic chain working up the body, but also in terms of the chain of events over time, they can seem unrelated, but it is a slow progression. And we can reverse a lot of that simply by regaining function.
Yeah, interesting. In reflexology terms, they say if somebody has a bunion, it's associated with the emotional state of bending over backwards for people, doing too much,
Okay, which kind of ties into the heart and that service
self-care.
to others over your own needs being met. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like I said, in our Living Anatomy series, which we'll be launching fairly shortly, we'll look at not just that anatomy, but we'll also then go on to look at how to find those muscles on your own foot,
Mm-hmm.
what techniques we can do to treat them to bring back that muscle balance, do a little bit of joint mobilization as well. Very simple, very gentle work. It's all pain-free. And then what simple home retraining we can do to help maintain that balance. And there's a really nice exercise for big toe mobility that I think a lot of people find challenging, but as you practice it, it gets quite easy, and it's a really good thing for maintaining mobility in the big toe.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. So we'd love to hear some of your comments. Any of this that you found interesting, drop the comments below. We do read them. And anything else that you're interested in us pursuing or talking about.
Yeah. Other than that, we'd like to say thanks for watching all the way to the end. And we'll be back in another few weeks. Be sure to subscribe to Watch HCD, or if you're watching this on social media, do hit that like and share button.
And check out our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Thanks very much, folks. Be well.